Hello, this is the Lunar Poetry Podcast. I'm David Turner, and today I'm joined by Pat Cash. I think we're just going to start today with Pat introducing himself for a couple of minutes.
Hi, I'm Pat Cash. I'm a journalist, performer and creative writer, and what transcends the latter two of being a performer and a creative writer is being a spoken word poet. And I started off doing spoken word at a night when I lived in Paris when I was 25, and I started off doing it at a night named Spoken Word Paris, which was completely open mic, 5 minutes for everyone. No one got any more than 5 minutes, and when I came back to London I couldn't find quite the same night with the same ethos, so I decided to set it up with Spoken Word Paris's blessing, and it's called Spoken Word London. And now I flip between my three roles of journalist, performer and creative writer around town, both in London and Paris.
Yeah. Okay, so that leads me on quite neatly to the first question. You just mentioned Spoken Word London there, which in my opinion is the most interesting, welcoming open mic night in London, well, North London at least. I really wanted to ask, what did you hope to achieve when you started the night, and how, if at all, did you want to make it different from other open mic nights in London?
I think I wanted to achieve primarily a welcoming atmosphere, so just anyone can feel, accepted and almost at home at. And that it's kind of nurturing idea, that people who come along, if they're coming for the first time and they've got this poem in their bag and they've never ever read before in their lives, and they want to, they're really really scared that that this night is going to give them the support and the kind of ethos that they can read for the first time, but also something for established speakers, for anybody to come along and just be part of something and eventually evolve into a little community, which it has done, which I'm very pleased about.
Was it like that from the start, or did it take a while to get that mix of newcomers and established performers?
Well, at the start we had about 10 people, like literally in the corner of we run it in this basement bar called Vogue Fabrics, which you know obviously, because you've been there a number of times yourself, and
a number of times as a general punter at a weekend as well.
Oh really? Yeah.
That's another story.
Vogue is a sweaty club at the weekends, so we're like it's arts relief during the week. And there were about 10 people there, and there was one amazing girl, I can't remember her name, I think it was just like Amory, I think, who did a brilliant piece, and it just built up from there. Like we went on to promoted it over social media mostly. I don't think I've ever done any flyers or posters for it, and just through Facebook, Twitter, through using the group Poetry in London, it's kind of built up over time. And I think it was very important as well. I mean, I'm not here to like denigrate any other night in London, but why I set it up was I was going around nights in London, and it seems open mics at some nights were kind of tagged on after the hosts had their friends, to feature, which is great. And the features were generally really, really great, but then half the audience would leave for the open mic, and mostly it'd just be the people who were open micing and their friends. And then there were slams, and slams are amazing, and they can create a really edgy energy and really get people on the edge of their seats. But if you're a first time reader, you're not going to go to a slam and get up there and have to do your 3 minutes and then be rated out of 10 by
I quite agree.
Everybody afterwards. So I wanted to create something that was just equal, an equality ethos.
Yeah, I think it's the one thing that stood out for me the first time I went to Spoken Word London was the feeling that you could just get up. It felt like a true spoken word night rather than a poetry night. Although you're free to obviously come and read poetry, it felt like you could come along and just use your voice in any way you chose to, and it was really it really stood out in my mind.
I think that's definitely the thing. I mean, I call it a poetry and performance night because it is completely open mic. Like anyone could, as long as it's got some form of verbal communication, you can come and do it. I'm not going to. No one's going to come up and push you off if you decide to just speak naturally, and a lot of people. Well, we've had a lot of people in the past who have done. It's not kind of like this has to be spoken word poetics.
And you tend to get quite a good crowd there of people that are coming just to watch as well, don't you? Which is, I think, because of that blend of, because it's not strictly speaking a poetry night, it doesn't put off people coming just to watch or entertain themselves.
I think the 5-minute thing kind of adds to that as well, because people know that there's generally, but we're really lucky, and I'm honoured that there's been so many great people of such top-notch calibre that have been there and have taken their slots. But also it appeals to the audience in a way because number one, they're going to hear like a multifaceted, 100-headed kind of like concept of voices through the evening. But also, if they're not particularly engaged by one speaker, then the 5-minute rule means that that speaker will be gone relatively quickly, and someone else will be up. They're not going to be there for 25 minutes listening to this person. So that kind of, the rapidity of it also appeals to people. But I would like to say that the number one factor of appeal is the inclusiveness.
Great. I think next I'd like to talk about your own poetry and what I've seen of it, which is quite a bit now. But your poetry often has a strong sort of social message to it. Two parts to this question: is that a very conscious decision, and why do you choose the spoken word scene as a platform to discuss these particular issues?
Yeah, definitely now it's a very conscious decision. I don't want to take a conscious thing. This answer could go on forever, so I'll try and keep it succinct. But when I started off in Paris, a lot of my poetry was personal, kind of like, I guess the word would be epistolary, to somebody, written with the you, with the kind of like the neutral pronoun, never like he or boy, but I am gay, and I was out as gay at the time in Paris. But when I was, expressing myself down on the page for some of the first times, in terms of, I've always been a writer beforehand. I worked on prose beforehand. It's when I was expressing it spoken word, when I was actually going to be, I knew I was going to be sharing in front of an audience. I still wouldn't use, writing about like a past love or something. I wouldn't use he.
Okay.
And I think that's because I still did have some hang-ups about my sexuality at that time. And then I came back to London and I started working for a gay magazine as a journalist in which is at the heart of the gay community in London. And a lot of the issues that I'm dealing with daily involve internalised homophobia, shame about gay men's, lingering shame about gay men's sexuality, and about sex, about gay sex, because we live in a world very heteronormatively infused with sex to sell, advertising, to sell toothpaste, even, and on billboards, when you go past. Whereas gay male sex is particularly under the table. Still, it's a case of grateful of gay marriage, but no sex, please, boys. It sometimes feels like anyway. So I had to, dealing with all these issues and writing about them daily. That became a step to I can't do this gender neutral pronoun anymore. I've got to make it explicitly about being gay, and I've got to make a voice for. So
did becoming involved with the spoken word or performing your own poetry, did that help you come to terms with any issues that you had yourself? Personally, did it help you overcome? Or
definitely,
yeah,
I'd say so. And it's the way of. It's also in terms of who you can reach as an audience, and it's a way it's about inclusivity. I mean, I do hasten to add, not all my poetry is about gay stuff, but a lot of it is.
I did want to make that point quite early on.
Yeah.
I didn't invite you here as that gay poet that I know. But isn't that it's you? I do think you're a very talented poet. These issues that you're talking about aren't solely because you're a gay man, are they? The ideas of masculinity and gender roles, these affect everyone,
Exactly. There's a lot of that, and then there's a lot about division, social division, I think, that there is ongoing social division between minorities and minorities against one another. And I guess if I wanted to sound a little bit like hippie-like, my ultimate, like, underneath everything that I write is a call for harmony, greater harmony. And yeah, it is about it. And so, because a lot of spoken word audiences are largely straight, then I am bringing a voice of gay people. When I do LGBT issues, I'm bringing an LGBT voice to.
Actually, that might be a good point to go on to the next question. No, actually, it's so having spoken to many performers about this perceived lack of social commentary in spoken word. Somehow people are perhaps not political enough. This is just one view, and it's not an issue whether that's true or not. It's just this perceived idea. Most have sort of agreed that the best place to seek out that kind of poetry is within the LGBT community. Yes. And do you agree with that, or do you think that it's just those outside of that community mistakenly categorise poetry touching on those issues as being social commentary rather than just it could be do you understand what I mean? It could be you yourself could get up and tell a poem, read a poem about your sex life or issues around that. It may be a deeply personal poem to you, but others may mistakenly read it as some sort of social or political act.
Yeah, I mean, it's if you're giving a voice to a minority group, it's always going to be a slightly political act, however personal it is, because often the most personal poems will deal with, well, from my experience in the LGBT community, we'll deal with feelings of rejection or inferiority or having been sidelined in any way growing up, either by being sidelined by being actually homophobically bullied, or sidelined as in having to stay in the closet and act to avoid that. And then, in that sense, you do, because you're talking about, however personal it is to you, it's still something that is a commentary upon wider society and the flaws in wider society and the division in wider society that exist, and therefore that's always going to be political. But I think also it's about voices, it's about being heard, it's about coming out with your, like, literally coming out with your words, from being smothered. I remember talking to Jacob Joyce, who's a regular at Spoken Word London, a brilliant regular at Spoken Word London, and has hosted it for us.
I think it's good just to mention Jacob for a second. If people want to find him, because I think the issues we're talking about is a really great place to look for this kind of poetry. He performs under. You can find him under. Is it Silk Word, isn't it?
On Facebook. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Just.
He's also got a website. I think it's jacobvjoyce.com.
Yeah.
And I was interviewing Jacob about race, about LGBT community and race a while back, and because a lot of Jacob's poetry deals with race politics, and I was saying, when he made a comment of, like, if you are, it was about, like, are black people more homophobic? Is that because there's a stereotype that homophobia is more ingrained in the black community? And he said, no, I think they're louder. Like, that girl on the bus, that black girl on the bus is going to be louder because she's grown up with no Disney princess who's black, and no voice, and if you've grown up with no voice, then you're going to use your own voice louder in society in general, and therefore you might hear things like slurs more. And I think that is applicable. That scenario that Jacob brings up is applicable to the idea of LGBT people in spoken word. There are. I say the audience is straight. I was thinking of because they're different nights. Like if I go to Until the Lights Goes Out, for instance, I think the majority of the audience there is straight. Actually, it's spoken word London, probably about half the audience is gay. There's
it's a very mixed audience.
Yeah,
there, isn't it?
Yeah. I don't know if half of it. I mean, maybe, but there's a lot. It attracts a lot of gay people and attracts all kind of minorities along, which I really love and I really think is great. And that's the thing. Sorry, I don't want to.
No, go on.
But it's about different groups, different factors, different elements of the city of London coming together. I think that's why it's called Spoken Word London, and different threads intertwining.
Yeah, that's a good point. Actually, now I want to move on to it's similar to what we've been talking about now, but really where your poetry strikes me the most or affects me the most is when you talk of issues that you face as a man, regardless of your sexuality or your background or your alter ego Patricia. I'd like to talk about a bit about later because it's fantastic. But this idea of masculinity and the expectation placed on men and boys to conform to certain gender roles. I was going to ask if this was a subject you'd like to see more poets discussing, but I think we've probably agreed that probably it would be a good thing. But do you think because we're all up at the mic, as it were, I'm talking about male performance just for the moment, but this could be applicable to females as well, just the other way around. And we're up there talking about our feelings, that there's a mistaken belief that we're all too well adjusted to discuss these topics. Do you know what I mean? Like we're all seen as well-adjusted boys because we're talking about our feelings. So
because we're taking the step of
getting up and talking about things,
and taking that communication.
Yeah.
Yes, but people can still. I've still seen people get up on the stage. We were talking just now about a guy who I didn't see him, but you would before this podcast started. You were saying about a guy who got up and spoke a pro UKIP poem, essentially. And UKIP. I mean, they seem to be a group that are pro-division. I mean, they want to take us out of Europe, and they also if you type in UKIP to any kind of news websites, if you go back far enough, I mean, even recently, and you will find the most racist, homophobic, transphobic stuff coming out. I mean, it's so in terms of people, performers getting up on the stage. It depends. It depends the content. I don't think getting up on the stage is something that you can say I do spoken word and therefore I am connected with my.
No. Sorry, that's what I'm just thinking that there's maybe this mistaken belief that, and that's maybe why these things aren't talked. It may just be through embarrassment that guys won't get up and talk about issues of masculinity because ultimately they come back to perhaps an acceptance of a certain level of femininity, and finding that balance between what's a healthy level of which we've, without referring to too much stuff that's happened, we've talked about before this podcast, and we've discussed this idea before about this need for a healthier view in society for the way men behave, particularly towards women and other groups of society.
I think we do live in a patriarchy. Where power is automatically placed upon the male from an early age, and so but boys are growing up told they need to be strong, they need to be big, and they need to be muscled, and they need to be the action man, and that things like flowers and things like the colour pink and they're just almost things like kindness and being gentle and having some kind of tenderness around you are girly, effeminate things that that shouldn't be part of your butch invincible masculinity, and that's quite unhealthy, I think, for a lot of children to be brainwashed into, for any child to be brainwashed into thinking, because in your later psychology, you eschew anything that might allow you to accept and talk about things and bring a greater idea of acceptance, I guess, of because we're all supposed to. I mean, like if you go into gender theory, there aren't these two binaries of. I mean, Judith Butler it's a construct and it's performativity. Sorry, yeah. And so there isn't like male this side. I just hit the table with my left hand, and I'm female. I just hit the table with my right hand on this side. We are on this spectrum that's between us, but if you have it's almost creating a split personality with boys. Again, if you're brought up and told, get rid of this, get rid of this, get rid of this, get rid of this, but they're an innate part of yourself already, then you're really kind of like fucking someone up psychologically, So I think there's a lot of like insecurities about masculinity going on in this kind of like strange, weird patriarchy that we live in, and that can be brought out, and that's oppressive for a straight white man, that they got all this social pressure around them, so that can find its outlet in Panty Bliss says in her Panty Bliss is this drag queen from Ireland. She says this well, she actually no, sorry, it's RuPaul. It's RuPaul from RuPaul's Drag Race. He as a man, I can't remember what his name is, but he's incredibly intellectual and eloquent. And when he was interviewed, he was like, people have been oppressed, take on the elements of their oppressors. So even the straight white male, that boy growing up in our society, is taking on elements of oppression that he's gonna bring out as into outlets of oppressing others. So to go back to your original question of masculinity and how I think for myself personally, when dealing with my sexuality when I was coming out in my late teens, it was incredibly important. I mean, I took it as a real compliment if I told someone at a party and I was gay, and they said like I would never have realised, and I was like, oh, that's amazing, that's so important, because I'm never going to be camp, I'm never going to be effeminate, but actually that was me, there was a combination of what I was just talking about taking on the elements of oppression,
just trying to conform,
so but now I've completely changed that, and I completely take on all elements of my femininity and masculinity. This is Hate by Pat Cash. I've been thinking a lot lately about hating, what eats at the heart of hate, because I hate people every day. I hate tourists on Oxford Street, I hate children on the tube, and I hate slow walkers stopping me getting to my train. I want to grab their faces, say with all that rage is, get out of my fucking way. But I don't, because I know my hatred is a ghost. It's a quick flick switch, a brief lit wick. It's a fake shade of hate, just a frustration of place. Don't get me wrong, I'm not a saint. I dislike a fair few people, but that's not the same as hating. That's not the same as wanting to stamp on their faces. Because haters always going to hate, they say. And in some places, if you ain't got hatred, you ain't got status. So let's play with the face of hate. Hate me for a moment. Hate everything I am. Hate me because I am different to you. Hate my words and my brothers too. Hate me for my body that ends at my fingertips. Hate my skin, my pigmentation. Hate me for the sensations I share with another in bed. Hate me for my private moments. Hate my thoughts and fears and dreams. Hate the man I might yet be. And then take your hate away and make it something great. Nurture your hatred. Feed it and mould it like clay. Sculpt it like glass being blown until it fits the shape of your soul. And hate will heat you in the cold. Hate will be there when you're alone. And at this point, I would speak of the crimes of hate. Of a woman in Iran stoned because she was raped. Of screaming ugly at a woman in a magazine. Of misshapen faces and mistaken shame. And this poem is about hate crime, but it's also about why. It's about Cameroon, Uganda and Russia. It's about a neighbour hating another. It's about LGBT. It's about immigrants. It's about the UKIP and the EDL and the Prontons Francais and the black boys shot on the streets in the USA. It's about transgendered camps in Greece and anti-Semitism in Hungary. It's about hospitals being blown up in Palestine. It's looking at a human race that sometimes seems consumed and wasted by hatred. It's standing up to that and saying, yes, I am not afraid.
I think I'd like to talk a bit now about your work as a journalist. I suppose the first question, just the simple thing, is does your work as a journalist influence your poetry or vice versa, or do they just exist as two separate natural outlets for you to discuss and explore topics?
Generally, I try to keep them separate, but if I'm writing an article about like I wrote an article having just spoken about the masculinity subject. I wrote a poem called Real Man, which was about a gay man who's going around telling himself that telling everyone that he's a real man, and he's choosing any feminine qualities, but actually he's a drag queen. But then he's actually a boxer as well, and so as he goes as a drag queen to become a boxer, to go on to fight as a drag queen boxer in a boxing ring. And some of the lines in there are taken directly from an article I wrote about doing drag and about these issues of in the gay male world, of why on one side everyone loves drag and everyone embraces it, and on the other side everyone's like mask, on Grindr, which is this gay app. It's like must be masculine, no femmes, no gesticulations, etc. Get rid of your.
Who's the poet? Keith
J.
Keith J. He does a fantastic poem about, I think it's sort of loosely based on Grindr, but it's basically all the things that person doesn't want. It can't be feminine, can't be black. Sorry, just my preference and all that. And it's just a fantastic.
He did it at Velvet Tongue.
That's right.
I
really like that.
Fantastic. Yes, so sometimes inevitably, what I'm writing about journalistically will find an outlet also in my spoken word. But generally, I keep it.
And do you do most of your writing for one publication, or do you?
Yeah, I work like to full time to pay the rent during the day, but also because I enjoy it for this magazine called QX, which is the gay community magazine, Yeah, and outside of it, I write for various other publications as well.
Yeah, and just because I saw you on, for the Lunar magazine launch we're recording this on Friday. It was last Sunday, whatever that date was. I can't remember when it was. Anyway, and Pat came along and you did a short story.
Oh yeah.
I'm quite interested because a lot of the stuff I do is quite rambling and there's not really poetry as such anymore. Do you see that as because when you introduced the piece, or you suggested, you asked the audience, do you want a story or a poem? It sort of led me to believe, like, in that situation, probably maybe just on that stage, you felt like you had to have permission to read a story. Is that right, or just getting the wrong impression? Right,
yeah, definitely. Because it was Lunar Poetry. It was a poetry night.
Yeah.
But then I just finished the story that day, and so I was like, do I? Yeah.
But do you, in your own mind, see the stories and the poems as separate things? As physical structures, they are different things. But in terms of creative outlets.
Yes.
Yeah,
for myself personally. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I know if I'm writing a poem, I know if I'm writing a short story.
Is that okay?
It's a different thing.
Yeah. I don't see that, but that's just a personal thing.
Yeah.
Right,
but poems can have stories in them. The poem, you can have a narrative poem that is a story, but it's the structure.
Yeah. I think perhaps and this will become quite clear in the next few minutes, that my mind rambles too much to see a difference. When I start writing, I have no idea what's going on. Right, so I'm going to basically ask you some rambling and pretty leading questions, because I've frankly made a lot of assumptions as to what your answers might be. Sure. Right, so actually, a very common thing, just because it was a very big issue in the first 2 issues of the Lunar Poetry magazine. There was an article split up into 2, which was written by Paul, the editor. There's this question about page versus stage, in that some poets see their work as printed, and some, like myself, I don't submit my work for publication; it just exists on stage. Is this an issue for you, and do you think it's an issue at all for the spoken word scene as in a wider view? And would you change your writing style depending on whether the poem were only to be printed or performed?
No, definitely not. I wouldn't change it.
You wouldn't change it?
No. If it works on the stage and people connect with it and people hear it as they hear it, then it's going to work on the page as well. There's no reason why it won't.
No.
And I think it only exists in kind of like other people's minds, why if there's a difference between page and stage. Mm-hmm. Of course, there are kind of like you will get pedants about meter and about iambic, pentameter, etc. But I think that's all in the past. We need to be going forward.
People keep challenging me to write sonnets. I still don't know what one is, but
okay. I've never written a sonnet in my life,
but I think
and I don't intend to start now.
I think they're just going to find it hilarious. I think that's what it is.
I think meter can be very imprisoning.
Yeah.
Sometimes it can be great, but I mean, one of the best poets, in my opinion, one of the best poets in the world is T.S. Eliot. He never used, and he always used free verse. I
think actually it's a good point that you make about it existing in other people's minds. I tend to find that whenever anybody says, "Oh, there is an issue, this page versus stage issue that exists," and you ask them, what do you think that? And they will always say inevitably, no, some other people think that. And I've never found those other people that, I don't think anyone really does think it. I think there's this idea that there's a problem or there's an issue, but it doesn't really exist, because, I mean, frankly, why should it? I mean, I have noticed for myself, if I tell people that I write some pieces only to be performed, I think they assume that I've got a problem with things being printed, and it's not that at all. It's just I choose. No,
I mean, I think this is all kind of like not to downplay what you're saying, but in general, in the kind of like in the general vision of things, this is all superfluous, kind of fluff around a core, and at the core is honesty, and if you have honesty, then it's there. So there's no issue with page or stage. It's just about being honest or not honest.
This is going to seem as equally as fluffy, I'm sure, but it's something that comes up, and people. It seems to be an issue for some people, but this thing of reading from paper or reciting from memory, and this actually does divide some performers, and they will admit to not liking when someone gets up with paper. And what's quite funny is that some people just about to accept reading from paper, but if you dare try and read from an iPhone, that's just to be the worst thing you could ever do. Yeah. But do you have any feelings? I mean, I think I know what your answer is, but do you have any feelings on it? Because I think it probably puts a lot of people off if they think this issue exists.
I read from paper all the time.
Yeah.
It does create a better freedom of movement, and I would definitely say a better freedom when I've memorised a poem, and when I'm doing it from memory to the audience, I can connect more. I can see their eyes. I can really talk to them. The paper is binding, and it means that you have to kind of like refer back to it, and so you have to take away your connection to the audience while you're on stage to connect with the paper, which is you have to be. Which can be, it's risky because you can lose the audience in doing that if you look at it too much. And but if you have a supportive audience, which we do at Spoken Word London, I mean, almost everyone reads from paper at Spoken Word London, and iPhones as well. And there's no difference between the paper and the iPhone. If you're reading, you're reading. I mean, anyone who says this has some kind of hang up about that really needs to check themselves in some way.
I think that really the reason I brought these 2 points up, because even though they seem maybe a little bit ridiculous to you and I.
No.
I'm not. Sorry, I was just 1 second. I think because, like we discussed before we started recording, I'd like this podcast to be for anyone that's either been involved with spoken word for a long time, a short time, or not at all. And I think issues like this, issues that don't really exist, can put people off of starting. And I think it's important that maybe someone might hear this and actually realise that it doesn't matter if I'm too nervous to memorise a poem. I can read from paper and it's okay,
definitely read from paper. But if you're just enough, read from paper. Read from paper. Do not put extra pressure on yourself. It's nerve-wracking enough going up and speaking in front of an audience in the first place. Do not put extra pressure on yourself to memorise stuff. I've seen some amazing people with amazing poets who amazing poems at Spoken Word London, where it's probably, I mean, I'm not trying to honk my own horn, but it is a really supportive, loving, kind of friendly audience. Whenever there's there's a newcomer, everyone's like, I'm really kind of giving them all the strength and support they can. But it's still you're in front of, you've got all these faces staring at you, and if you make it's happened to me before. I made eye contact with someone while I'm trying to read something from memory. There's this cosmic blast, in my head, everything's gone, and literally, and some people I've seen bring it back, and they can stand there and close their eyes and be like, I can't. After it's gone, it's gone. Yeah. I have to get out my phone, scroll, which is really embarrassing. Scroll through looking for it, or just stop it there. I'm doing it. I've been doing spoken word I'm 27 now. I've been doing it for a good 2.5 years, I guess. And I'm only just getting to the point where I can do stuff from memory. It takes a long time. So definitely actually do not listen to anybody.
No. Just last weekend, actually, I was at Platform 1, which is at the Poetry Cafe on a Saturday evening. One Saturday per month, and Niall O'Sullivan got up and did a 10-minute set or 15-minute set. And for those who don't know, Niall O'Sullivan is the host of Poetry Unplugged. He's been the host for about 357 years or something, and he's fantastic, an amazing poet. And got up and said, the first thing he said was, "I used to read from memory, but now I have a baby, and I know now all I can remember is the theme tune to whatever children's program there is now." And he did the whole set from paper, and it didn't break down because he had the confidence to read from paper and not worry too much. And it worked out fine. I think personally I would have liked to have seen him do it without paper, but then it didn't ruin the poems at all.
Of course not. And because that's I mean, the performance is it's called performance poetry for a reason. And the performance is part of it. But the performance is probably about 25%, 30%. At its heart, it's what going back to the page stage thing. I'd say the same thing. If anyone said what's good spoken word, there's no good spoken word, there's no bad spoken word, it's honest spoken word. And if you've got that honesty, it doesn't matter the little details surrounding it, the superfluous fluff.
I think the reason it gets brought up as an issue for me, because I so very, very rarely read from paper. People assume that I have a problem with people reading from paper. But the only reason I don't read from paper is because half the time it isn't written down. I don't have anything to read. But that's, it's everyone doing their own thing. And I think that's one thing that I tried to hold in when I was writing, was that idea that if what I was writing was honest, I can handle people telling me the technique is slightly wrong, or I could have changed this word for that word, or put a slightly longer pause in. But no one could ever tell me it wasn't true.
Yeah.
To what I felt.
I mean,
and I think you're right, and you made an excellent point. Now I think all these issues are just they're really meaningless.
It's the words,
and it's sort of sometimes in spoken word you get this sense of like an old boys club, and they're trying to impose certain rules. Certain, because I don't know why it should be all inclusive, which is why I love your night, and hopefully our lunar nights are going to become the same. And there's apparently a night down in Oval, I don't know, Silence for something, I don't know.
This is very good.
really great.
You
can find that on Face or something. Anyway, let's move on from that rubbish. Right, so the next question, to which I'm assuming your answer will be that depends, because it seems like the fairest answer, but if you could maybe elaborate a little bit either way. Do you write with the intention to perform, or do you allow the performance to suggest itself after you've written a poem?
Well, that's an interesting question. I think I let performance suggest itself.
Okay.
But if I was saying like my poem on hate, like once when I'm writing that, it does have shorter lines than I usually write, because it's got that kind of blunt, kind of a fiery, hate-filled essence to it in the way that it's written. Even though it's not about hating people, it's an anti-hate poem, But that seeps into it as I was writing. I remember I wrote it on like an afternoon in my bedroom, I had the day off work or something, and then that comes across because in your performance, because shorter lines create more kind of sense of.
Do you find the physical look then of a poem it helps you to cue your performance in some way?
Yes,
or maybe just in that sense?
I think that, so. I've never thought about it that explicitly, the physical look from but maybe subconsciously you as you do it more, you will begin, and you can see it on the page if you're reading from the page. And you will know which breaths to take, and how big your breath is, because as you do anything, as you practice anything, you become better at it, and your brain becomes attuned to it.
Sure.
I guess, So I would say but generally I let the performance just happen and on the night. And sometimes I get overwhelmed by something. Which is like, because write stuff that's very emotional to me, and it's not like a gimmick like that I do. But if I'm in an emotional
I think that you're one of the few performers I've seen get truly, properly emotional.
There was one time when I just
and I think it's really admirable, that you do let yourself get into the moment like that. Because I know from my own experience, even though I write quite emotionally charged stuff, it doesn't always grab you, because sometimes you're too in the moment. It takes a lot of courage to let yourself, one, concentrate on what you're reading, and two, let yourself go with the emotion as well, because it's quite terrifying to let that happen, because you don't know how far it's going to go. So do you find, does it take much practice to polish a particular performance, or a performance of a poem?
No.
Do you find it comes quite naturally?
I mean, I am like a performer outside of spoken word poetry as well, so I think that definitely helps in terms of performance, but it just comes naturally. I think that's the best way of doing it, rather than just kind of rehearse. I mean, I think definitely if you're memorising something and you want to rehearse it, actually, I say it comes naturally, but I could be a lot better if I did, stay in my bedroom and rehearse it in front of a mirror.
The thing is, it's better. The question is then, better in what way, isn't it? What
better in terms of rehearsed performance, definitely.
I know, but then is that a goal?
Yeah, exactly. Or maybe I would lose that essence of naturalism about it, and that kind of like connectivity, which is that raw connectivity. So I prefer to keep that, I think. This is Gaze the Word by Pat Cash. Fuck. Putain. Merd. Minchia. Vavanculo. Cock. Cunt. Swear words have such immense potency in any tongue packed with power like a punch. They're the words of pain, of fury screaming. They're bad, they're naughty, they're the words of sex, horny and grinding and fucking good. Oh, they're rude, and they're puerile, but they're apexes of emotion and the salt of tears. How many broken hearts have been tattooed with fucking cunt on their cracks and shards? And when I say these words, when I let my tongue run over cunt, or lick the K in fuck, I am consciously stepping out of rules. Said what can't be said before water shed. How did we lend these words their split and spit? Because they're just words, just ripples of ships in the night. Gay, 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 gay. 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 If you repeat a word too many times, you begin to defy how it's defined. Erase the world of the word, bathe it of meaning, no longer sign nor signified until it becomes just sound. Noise of nature like whistling winds, wolves howling at the moon, the tethered growl of the human throat. But if I say gay, now, just once, it echoes with resonance in my mind. Rich, deep, dark, vibrating like a harp string, a word that strangely tied and still binds me, and I never wanted to be a gay writer, the gay poet with my gay poems, yet my writing and the words I use are in a way a form of fighting, to elevate gay, negate any shame, and I fear the fight won't end in my life. For in Russia, they give gay such power that the word can't be spoken on the streets. Gay a word like a lightning strike on minds, fizzing, sparking, a Catherine wheel at night. Black witches spell cast by blacker witches, who can't be heard nor spoken by children. Yet here gay is on children's lips each day, a word fallen swift, quick like sharp-shaped darts. Word to cloak the disliked and dispossessed. Noun for the rubbish, for useless and sad. Gay is for the lame, it trips off the tongue. That's so gay. You're so gay. You are such a gay. Weird oxymorons. My parents are so gay. And it becomes a word with hooks like thorns, because to state I'm gay in youth culture is not he who I love is a man like me. It's to say I am rubbish. I am lame. What strange, very brave words, just to say gay.
How do you view your relationship to an audience? Do you view them like as a necessity, in that if they weren't there buying drinks or tickets, you'd have no venue to read in, or do you hope to interact with or connect with them in some way?
Oh, definitely. I mean,
Yeah.
of course, well, you hope that you're going to connect with them.
Yeah.
I think audience are a necessity. Yeah, I mean, in terms of like spoken with before, in terms of a performance, you need an audience. Even if it's just one person, it's like Peter Brook says about the empty space. You can create drama if one person sits and watches a man walk across a room. But that's you need those two people. You need the watcher and you need the watched. You can't create. Is it perform? I mean, this is very philosophical.
Yeah.
I mean, is it performance if you're just in your room doing it to yourself? I mean, like, is it? Yeah, if a tree falls over in the forest, it doesn't make a noise, and there's no one around to hear it. I think So an audience is necessary to make a succinct answer to what's potentially a complex question, and. Do I want to connect with it? Yeah, of course. I mean, there's no reason that you do it if you didn't want to connect with the audience, because otherwise, if you read something that's false and doesn't connect with your audience, then you feel like you've wasted your time.
Are you? I suppose one question would be that the reason I've got these questions in my mind is that for a future podcast I'm going to be interviewing a couple of poets that think very differently on this subject. And while obviously the audience, if you accept that the audience has to be there for it to be a performance without being, don't go into that philosophical question of whether they could not exist, right? If they're going to exist, can you perform and disregard them? So there's this question.
Not for me personally.
No.
I mean, I love my audience as well. I'm not saying that because I love my fans. But you have to have for my personal style of. And I hate talking like this because it sounds quite divisive. But for my experience, I guess, of spoken word, you have to empathise with your audience as well, and that's how you connect with them, and because you empathise with in fact, the act of writing is an act of empathy with your audience, because you know you're going to be writing it out, so you have to think from their point of view as well as getting that emotional truth. You have to think of how they're going to hear it, and in performance you create a sense of empathy, because as much as spoken word, I say this a lot, as much as spoken word is about speaking, it's about listening. And it's about creating, and that's why I think it's popular, particularly amongst our generation of those to anybody, but particularly amongst our generation in people in their 20s who have grown up with quite a capitalist corporate-led world. It's creating a sense of empathy, and through that creating a sense of understanding of each other and a sense of community, which is very important. I
agree with you, and I'm also very happy that you put me in that generation of people in their 20s.
I thought you were.
I may as well be. Okay. I'm immature enough to be. Actually, just one short question to tack on to the end of that. How much does the audience influence the way you perform? And the audience's reactions influence your subsequent writing afterwards,
I don't think it influences my writing in particular. If I read a poem, say, at a night, I mean, it's unlikely that you're going to touch wood and I won't find a spoken word like this. But a night where they were deeply homophobic and they bottled me off the stage or something, I'm not going to go back and be okay, I can never write about gay issues again. But sometimes you will read out something that won't connect with your audience. Then I think you should try it again at a different night and see if it connects with the audience. Don't throw it away straight away. No. If it doesn't connect to a different night, maybe try it a third time. And if it doesn't, then probably you haven't.
So you'd rather
probably need to rewrite it.
And I think that's more. That was more what I was sort of getting to, not letting go of any firm moral viewpoints that you hold. It's just that you would tweak your writing style if something clearly wasn't working. You wouldn't, for instance, blame the idiot audience. You would walk away and try and change things.
I think it depends. I mean, it's awkward in terms of thinking whether this is a first-time poet or whether this is someone who's done it a lot.
Well, no. This is a question to you. I mean, this is how things affect you. I think these sort of questions. I don't know if you could.
Do the audience affect my writing? I mean, in terms of delivery, in terms of occasionally, in terms of empathy, yes, but of the issues I write about, no. I'm not worried that I'm going to find an audience that is full of people who won't know gay issues, or something like that.
Yeah. Okay, so we finally get the chance to talk about Patricia a little bit here.
Yeah.
So you were up at Edinburgh Fringe in August.
So can I just add on to that last bit?
Yes.
If they are an audience who aren't going to connect with something that I'm writing, that I've written about gay issues, such, that is my job, to create a sense of empathy through my emotional truth and through my honesty, performing in front of them to change their minds, and that's the power of spoken word in a way. So that's.
That's a good point to make. It's. I think the reason I ask that question is because I don't think everyone has that same viewpoint, and I I do think that some people do need to change their writing styles in order to get their point across more. Not to.
Yeah, you might. Do that.
I mean,
It's
some
a
people
very,
perhaps don't
it's a
care about
vast
it.
and complex question. I mean, sometimes, and not every poem is going to be the same, and not every poem is going to be under the same writing style. And sometimes maybe I would need to change my writing style for something. Maybe I've written a lot of bad poems in my time, like that haven't connected, But has that maybe changed things? It depends upon. I think any writer is going to be, multifaceted and polyhued and have a lot of different approaches and different styles, and kind of like swirling rain clouds that they can use, and so hopefully another, a collage of paints that you can use, and you will dabble with lots of different things in your experimentation, hopefully.
So, talking about dabbling with different things, if we could chat a bit about your trip up to the Edinburgh Fringe in August. If you want to tell us a bit about that and how that went down. First off, maybe just explain what you did up there and what was going on.
Well, I also wrote for the theatre, and I wrote these short monologues, each 10 minutes, about contemporary LGBT characters, which I called the Fagash monologues, and they're all smokers. They all have like one scene in them in particular where they're having a cigarette, and one of them was created, actually written a long time ago. It was in Christmas of last year when we set up a cabaret show at the same In Vogue, and I needed to differentiate the cabaret show from Spoken Word London, which is held at the same venue. And I was like, well, how do I? And you still need to host it. How do I differentiate? And so I came up with a drag alter ego. It's called Patricia Primarché, and she's very cheap, and she always keeps the price tag on. She dresses only in Primark. And to introduce her, I wrote. This is how the monologue started. I wrote a short monologue around her, which went very well. And so in Edinburgh, and so I performed them in London. I had them at the Landor Theatre first with some friends playing them, and then I performed at the RVT, which you came to very, very kindly, and it got a really good crowd at the RVT and a really good response, and then I took them up to Edinburgh for a week, and now we're in the process of filming them. So
Are you filming?
Well, we're filming one to show at another night which I run, which is a kind of community-based gay night called Let's Talk About Gay Sex and Drugs, because there's, I don't want to get sidetracked, but there are a lot of drug use problems amongst the gay male, certain sections, mainly stress, of the gay male community in London at the moment. So we set up a night for them to talk about it.
And this night, if anyone's listening is interested in that's the title of the night, isn't it? They can find it on Facebook. It's quite memorable. Let's Talk About Gay Sex and Drugs. And on we've actually got funding from a council in London to do a Let's Talk About LGBT sex and drugs. Because beforehand it was just gay men. Now it's open to lesbians, gay men, bisexual, transgendered. If anyone doesn't know where LGBT is, you'd be surprised. And we're gonna show one of these, because one of these deals with drug issues, gay drug issues, gay men and drug issues, and we're going to show one of them we're filming it to show one of them at the event. I highly recommend anyone listening to check it. Once this stuff goes out, the film of these monologues, they're really fantastic.
Well, I'm working on the workplace monologues as well, which is more because as I said, I never wanted to be like I think one of the lines of one of my poems is, which I've done before that you've heard, is I never wanted to be the gay poet with my gay poems, and I don't want to just write about LGBT issues. I'm more interested in society in general, but right now that's what I'm focusing on. So the workplace monologues are more about the kind of like corporate cold capitalist world, but they're also humorous and they're also comedic, and they'll should be ready next year.
No, but I mean that's the thing about your writing and a lot of writing on these issues, and I just seen the fantastic Andrea Gibson in Stockholm, who is talks about a lot of similar issues, but what's at the heart of them is just the loneliness and rejection that people often feel, and the despair at not being accepted by society, and that isn't solely an issue for minorities. A huge amount of people live with that. And that's what really came through from the monologues that you took to Edinburgh. It didn't matter that the sexuality of the main characters in all of them was inconsequential on that level. They were all just lonely, desperate people wanting to be loved by someone else. And that's nothing to do with sexuality. So
I guess they are all lonely people, but they've done in less people think they're going to come and be depressed.
No.
It's morbid, like a morbid state. They're quite funny.
Yes, they are funny.
But
Patricia
they're
in particular.
Patricia, Trash Bag Trish.
Trash. So I did. Sorry, I wasn't thinking that. I didn't mean it to make it sound. It's not as depressing as my stuff.
They're generally quite optimistic, I think, as well.
Definitely.
Which is my personal outlook on life.
Yeah. So we've come to our two final questions, which I think they may end up being the two final questions for every podcast, but we'll see about that.
Yeah.
It just depends whether I keep remembering to write them at the end of the paper. What or who has had the biggest influence on your writing and performing? And also, they can be separate. This is just the first question, by the way. They can be separate influences, but I suppose I'd be interested also if there's been any influences that have overlapped the two.
Yeah, what has been a big influence? My writing is nothing like his, but when I studied T.S. Eliot in sixth form, The Wasteland and the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock and The Hollow Men, that was a huge influence. I still do think he's fantastic. So in terms of like bigger influences, I talk about personal, connected influences. Sarah Kane is a fantastic playwright who deals with a lot of issues in very succinct text. It's very pared down and image based. And there was this, and when I was 17 or 18, which was probably a very formative time for me. I was just coming out at that age as bisexual first, and then on a natural transition to gay. There was this girl who I knew called Melissa Mary Finch, who wrote the most amazing poetry, and she inspired, and she was a member of DeviantArt. I don't know if you remember DeviantArt, which was this website for kind of like aspiring artists that's just full of teenagers putting up their poetry, their poetry, and I say just full of teenagers. It was amazing, and I thought, and everyone was doing self-expression. It was fantastic. If it was still going and there were still people doing it now, maybe we wouldn't live in such a cold-hearted world. But she wrote the most amazing poetry, and I loved it, and that inspired me to try it myself, even though I was writing prose like it already. And then we kind of like lost touch for a long time until I'd finished all my studies, and I'd been travelling in America, and I was back in Bristol, where I come from, for Christmas, and I was there for a couple of months after Christmas as well, living at home, just deciding what to do. And just before I was about to leave for Paris, we went on Valentine's Day, or Valentine's Eve. I met up with Melissa for a drink, and we went to see this spoken word night on the nature of love at Bristol Vic. And I've never put this connection before until you asked me just now, but she inspired me to write poetry when I was 18, which I stopped doing for a while. But then I went with her to see the spoken word night, and it was the most amazing thing. There were people like Adam Camerling there was Johnny Fluffy Punk, there was Rachel Rose Reid, and they were all doing spoken word about the nature of love, and I'd never seen it before, and I was like, I'd love to do something like this. And then I left, said goodbye to Melissa, went to Paris shortly after that, and started doing spoken word. So that was my story of how I was influenced into.
That's the most romantic intro to spoken word I've ever.
Yeah, that romantic. Yeah, in a kind of like, even though I'm gay and it wasn't it's just romantic.
No, there's a romanticised idea of finding it. Of finding the words.
Of having that. Yeah, that's the thing as well. Like, I mean, gay men who hate women, I can't understand. A female friendship has been hugely important. A male friendship and straight male friendship. One of my best friend in the world is a straight man. So that's my personal idea of better harmony, like how we can all stick together as well.
All just humans, man.
Exactly. Underneath it's a social construct.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, sexuality is an innate thing, but the concept of gay is a social construct. We could break free of these kind of.
If we were all allowed to exist on a spectrum rather than being forced to take one side of anything, it just is divisive in politics or in society. It just doesn't make any sense that things are left or right. It just doesn't.
Then of course. But if we all exist in kind of harmony with one another, the top-down power pyramid doesn't work anymore, which is some food for thought.
And okay, so this is the final question. So this is really some tips for the listeners to this podcast, all 4.5 of them, or whatever. What or who, and this doesn't have to necessarily be spoken word, should people go and check out that's happening sort of now? We could just it doesn't have to be in London.
Okay. Well, I've been talking about it all the way through. Please come to Spoken Word London. We'd love to see you there. Your Night, Silence Found a Tongue, is brilliant. I really enjoyed it when I was down there. I was featuring on it, but I really enjoyed it at Cable Cafe. Lunar Poetry, of course. I came for the first time last Sunday, and Hannah Gordon, who's a regular at Spoken Word London, did a fantastic job. Forget What You Heard, up the road from Spoken Word London, which is actually we clashed with when we started, but they're now on a third Wednesday of the month at Ryan's Bar in Stoke Newington. Brilliant night run by Ricky Rick, the most Livermore, and Matt Cummins, who and what else? Some of the people that come and perform. I mean, there's Andrea Spisto, there's Hannah Gordon, there's Jacob, who's Silkword. I would say Rajas Mystery is great. Lisa Lux does some fantastic stuff, who runs Prowl House magazine. This is very off the top of my head. Richard Lionheart is amazing. I've seen some people at Poetry Cafe who are brilliant. Jay, I can't remember her second name, she's transparent from the US. She's Jai something. And we see amazing people at Spoken Word all the time. It's there's too many to list, I think. Roberta Francis actually is a middle-aged, transsexual, male to female Irish poet who has done some of the most effective. Like one of the lines that she read at last Spoken Word London, and one of her lines is about receiving abuse in the street, and because as she walks past by like young straight males, and she wants to turn around and say, "Do you know how brave I am?" And I was like, "Yeah, she is brave." I think people should go and see her, and yourself, of course.
Well, you're very kind at that. And on that bombshell of how amazing I am, that's it. We're going to wrap up. To say thank you once more to Pat Cash, and get yourself down to Spoken Word London at Vogue Fabrics on Stoke Newington Road.
66 Stoke Newington Road. It's on Kingsdown Road as it morphs into Stoke Newington Road. Yeah,
but you can find it on Facebook.
Facebook.com/Spoken Word London.
Yeah, and Dark Fabrics is the cabaret night.
Dark Fabrics cabaret night, is every 2 months.
And let's talk about
Gay Sex and Drugs is monthly, on the second Monday of the month in Soho.
You write regularly for GX.
For QX.
QX, sorry.
Yeah, and I write for Attitude as well, and
for
the
Attitude.
Morning Star and Huffington Post.
So there is absolutely no excuse to find Pat. Thank you very much, Pat. It's been great chatting.
Yeah, no, thank you.
No,
It's been really fascinating. I hope I haven't motored on too much.
No, it was perfect. You really outshone my lack of preparation. I'm only joking. Right, this is Lunar Poetry, and that was the podcast. Bye.